Thank you, Madam Moderator. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today as we successfully concluded the first preparatory conference of the fourth International Conference on Financing for Development. We are very grateful to host this important international conference in Addis Ababa. This conference has been held here in Skylight Hotel from July 22 to 26, 2024. This gathering has been pivotal in setting the stage for the fourth International Conference on Financing for Development, where global leaders will convene in Spain next year to address critical issues related to financing Sustainable Development Goals. The first preparatory committee for the fourth International Conference on Financing for Development aimed at reviewing the progress on Addis Ababa Action Agenda and identifying actions and solutions to accelerate the implementation of Sustainable Development Goals. The conference we concluded today is the first of the four preparatory conferences organized up to the upcoming fourth International Conference on Financing for Development that will be held in Spain in 2025. The first preparatory conference, which we hosted this week, is attended by more than 850 delegates from UN member states, including ministers, representatives of UN organizations, regional and international organizations, civil society organizations, and academia. Participants actively engaged in both ministerial and technical substantive discussions to identify priorities, challenges, and opportunities for sustainable financing for development and accelerating the Sustainable Development Goals. During the past few days, delegates discussed various issues which are central to the pursuit of financing for sustainable development. Key lessons were also drawn for the fourth International Conference on Financing for Development. I will address and highlight. Regarding on addressing global challenges, the conference has underscored the urgency of addressing global challenges such as climate change, economic disparities, debt burden, global instability, and the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on development financing. The participants stressed the need for innovative and inclusive solutions to these pressing issues. Regarding commitment to Sustainable Development Goals, throughout our discussions, there has been a resounding commitment from all participants to accelerate progress towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by leveraging effective financing mechanisms. On issues of domestic public resources, we discussed the importance of mobilizing an effective use of domestic resources, issues related to strengthening tax revenue mobilization and administration, and enhancing the efficiency of public expenditure and domestic public resources are thoroughly discussed. On the other note, regarding sustainable debt, the conference underscored the importance of sustainable debt, responsible borrowing and lending. We also discussed the importance of debt restructuring and strengthening prevention of debt crisis. Regarding addressing system issues, we also deliberated on the need to reform the international financing architecture to accelerate the implementation of Sustainable Development Goals and 2030 Agenda. Critical issues like reforming global economic governance and strengthening the global financial safety nets were thoroughly discussed. The conference deliberated a reform is required to reduce volatility and to provide a stable global macroeconomic environment. Regarding renewed global partnerships, multilateralism has been a central theme of our deliberations. Delegates have reaffirmed the importance of renewed global partnership, solidarity, and in sustainable development financing and the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals. The conference stressed the importance of building trust and renewed global commitment for the implementation of SDGs. On inclusive development, the conference has highlighted the critical importance of leveraging no one behind in our pursuit of development financing. Emphasis has been placed on social protection and essential public services, inclusive growth, empowering vulnerable populations to participate fully in economic opportunities. Regarding increasing climate financing, we have emphasized that innovative and increasing climate financing is crucial to support mitigation, adaptation, and resilience building efforts in response to growing climate change-induced calamities. The effectiveness of our sustainable development endeavor is highly dependent on our measures to tackle the detrimental impact of climate change. Regarding strengthening development cooperation, we discussed the need to scale up international public finance for sustainable development through ODA and MDB's lending. Innovative approach to mobilize resources, including through blended finance and other innovative financing mechanisms are also highlighted. Regarding next steps, as we look ahead to the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development, which is scheduled to take place in 2025, we will carry forward the momentum generated here. The outcome of this first preparatory conference will feed into the agenda of the upcoming conference, where we anticipate robust discussions and concrete commitments from government, international organizations, civil society, and the private sector. In closing, I would like to extend our gratitude to all participants for their active engagement and valuable contributions. The first preparatory conference has laid a solid foundation for fruitful deliberations and a meaningful outcome at the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development. We remain committed to working together towards a more inclusive, sustainable, and resilient global economy. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency Ahmed Shide. Let's move on that note of multilateralism, increasing trust, addressing all these many challenges, including debt. Let's move over to Mr. Junhua, the UN Secretary General for Economic and Social Affairs and the Secretary General of the FFD, who is accompanied by Ms. Shari Spiegel. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. Well, dear members of the press, good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming to join us briefing. Just 1 hour ago, we concluded the first substantive session of the Preparatory Committee for the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development. At the outset, I just want to re-emphasize our profound thanks, profound gratitude to the government and the people of Ethiopia for their warm hospitalities extended to all participants over the past few days. And this session actually, all the member states of the United Nations, and very encouraging starting point. I also wish to thank my colleagues from the UN Secretariat, and particularly the ECA, Economic Commission of Africa, headed by my dear brother, Clark, for their dedication and excellent support to the conference. Well, dear colleagues, 9 years after the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, the historical agreement on financing for development, United Nations member states, international organizations, financial institutions, and civil societies once again convened in Addis Ababa. They all came here for a common goal, that is to address the need for renewed push to finance sustainable development and the SDGs. According to the initial figure, the meeting brought together almost 1,000 participants from 103 countries, including over 40 ministers. A lot has changed in the past 9 years. We are faced with increasingly frequent climate-related disasters. There has been enormous technological change, a series of global shocks have reversed our progress on SDGs, such as eliminating poverty and hunger, and also fighting inequality and fighting the climate change. The latest report tells us that only 17% of our SDG targets are currently on track to be achieved by 2030. The SDG financing gap for developing countries has bloomed to the $4 trillion annually. Debt challenges have reached to a dramatic scale, with dozens of the countries paying more debt service than they can spend on health and education for their own people. At the same time, discussions this week have revealed that the Addis agenda is still valid and sound. Where we have fallen short is in the implementation. Commitments have not been met, and a series of the new challenges have tested, and in many cases, overwhelmed our capacities to respond. Against this backdrop, United Nations member states have decided to convene FFD4 next year. The conference will be held at the end of next June in Sevilla, Spain. It is tasked with an ambitious mandate to address the financing challenges to achieve the SDGs and support the reform of the international financial architecture. This week's consultation here focused on lessons learned and opportunities ahead. Delegations made numerous proposals and presented ideas to overcome the current development crisis through an SDG investment push. Specific actions were posed to tackle the debt crisis and lower the borrowing costs for developing countries. On international development cooperation, countries suggested to strengthen accountability mechanism vis-à-vis the unmet commitments. On private finance, proposals were made to enhance the contributions of the private sector by harnessing the potential of industrial policies for sustainable development outcomes. Let me also emphasize the importance of collaboration and trust, which has been raised by many delegates. To build this trust, we must find solutions for financing challenges. Our journey started 9 years ago in Addis Ababa. It continued this week, again here in Ethiopia, to prepare the next year's conference in Spain. This will be a critical moment and perhaps our last chance to transform financing and rescue the SDGs. I thank you.
Secretary General, and on that note of having started here 9 years ago, a lot has changed in the last 9 years, and we now need to hear from Mr. Gatete, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, on what his take is on where we are going and the opportunities that lie ahead as we go forward, given Mr. Junhua has said that this is the last chance we have to find solutions for a sustainable, financially sustainable future. Over to you, Mr. Gatete.
Yeah, thank you very much, moderator. It's always very difficult to speak after the two very important people. One of them is our host. And also he was here when the last financing for development decisions were taken. He has more experience, me who can tell what happened, what challenges and all that. And I think has given a very good summary for that. The other one is the Secretary General for the FFD4. As you know, it feels good to be a Secretary General, at least for once. But he is a man who is behind the whole work of FFD. Although he is based in New York, but he keeps commuting to all the regions, and he will continue that way. And he has to see it until you get the final document. But let me just say a few things, and some of them will be repetitive to what our colleagues here have said. You know, we had a structure of financing global development, but the countries have grown. And the more you grow, the more needs, the more you need, the more money you need. And the growth of the resources to finance development is not coping up with actually the needs of the countries at this moment in time. And so this financing for development started in Monterrey, in Mexico, in 2002. They discussed, they gave good ideas, which really shaped the way forward. And this was followed up in Qatar in 2008. And then, of course, later on in Addis Ababa, that was the third, and this is the fourth one. And the fourth one is also taking into account the challenges that have taken place. You know, all the way from, you know, every year, every season has its own challenges. I'm sure some of you still remember the global financial crisis, 2008, 2009. You remember the fuel crisis, even with the Arab Spring, which had a huge impact in terms of the prices of fuel, and that caused inflation and a lot of other havoc. Then we continued with so many things, including the most recent one, which was very serious at the global level, which is the COVID-19, where people had to even incur more debt just to save lives. And then we saw climate coming in, which is something that we never used to talk much about, but the climate became very, very costly for all of us. And then there are global conflicts that came in. Everything requires money, and it costs money, and it has an impact on all of us. Now, what we are seeing is that we had also agreed at the global level on the SDGs, and we have a timeline, and we need to implement, meaning we need resources. But what we are saying, as our colleagues have been mentioning, there is no money. The cheap money is not enough. It's far from being enough. When I say cheap money, I'm talking about the one for 40 years, 10 years grace period, which is less than 2%. That one is very difficult to get. And for developing countries like ours, some of the countries who have very low rating, credit rating, if you go to the market, it will be very costly for you. And this money has been very useful in terms of developing our own countries. And also, of course, dealing with other issues of social safety nets. But at the same time, our countries have been helped to make sure that you can reach a certain level where you can compete globally for the other global resources beyond these kind of concessional resources. But for now, we need that money to be able to grow because the deficit is quite low. But at the same time, it is happening at the time we are highly indebted, where if you borrow, you have to pay up. And to pay it, you pay in foreign currency. You operate in local currency, but you pay in foreign currency. It has an impact on your reserves. It has an impact on how you intervene on the market because people import goods and services. And they import in foreign currency. So that means it has really a whole huge implication on the macroeconomic management. And that's why the debt has really scaled up. It's now about 1.1 trillion. For the Africa, where you are paying 163 billion every year to service the debt, but how long can you do this? Meaning there is really, your budget is squeezed. There is a very limited fiscal space that you have, and you are required to implement SDGs and Africa 2063. And then you have to run the economy and address the issues of the society. And that's why they are having challenges that we need to do something differently. There have been so many initiatives on how we can raise these kind of resources, including the SDG stimulus proposed by the Secretary General, the 500 billion per year. We've talked about Bridgetown initiative. We've talked about rechanneling the SDR, the special drawing rights. That is the currency of the IMF, 650 billion that we are released. But unfortunately, continents like Africa, all combined, they only got 34 billion. Which is just 4%. Very minimal, which is not enough, and we wanted to make sure that we campaign for the rechanneling of the rest through our development banks. We have had a very big impact. As you all know, for people who are here in this continent, you know there has been a lot of droughts, there has been a lot of floods, climate is real. You saw recently in East Africa, in Kenya, in Tanzania, in Burundi, in so many other countries, a lot of floods. But as you come south to Zimbabwe, Zambia, you'll see a lot of drought. Meaning this is what climate means, climate impact. And there's quite a lot that is being done in terms of the green bonds, the blue bonds, but also trying to see how we can also tap into the carbon to fill in the gap in terms of, that we could not raise the resources. So that carbon credit is something that we are working with all the member countries to make sure that we can educate them, because we never used to have this. Many countries never used to sell carbon. And here, countries which are starting, they are selling carbon to companies which are well experienced, and the bargaining power is not equal, is not leveled, meaning we are getting less than $10 per ton, in most cases less than $5 per ton, when elsewhere it's more than $100 per ton, the same ton of carbon. And that's where we are having a problem, and we need to do things differently. We have also, and here we are really, it's costing the whole economy about 5% according to our estimation, and sometimes it could go higher. And this is quite significant in addition to other issues that countries have. We also realize that not all the money will come from outside. We also need to look inward, and that's why our colleagues were talking about domestic resource mobilization. It was also repeated many times in these conferences that we need to do things differently. We need to bring in the informal sector, which currently stands at 82%. We need to make sure that we digitize the whole economy so that there is no ambiguity, so that there is transparency, and also deal with the issues of illicit financial flows, which is quite important. We need to have the capital market so that it can cater for the private sector needs. That's where they can borrow on long term. If you don't have a capital market, there are no resources for private sector. You cannot borrow expensively from the commercial banks and then make progress. So that's not enough. But at the same time, we need also to bring in the private sector. Governments alone can never grow the economies the way we want it. That means you create an environment where private sector can be a partner in terms of investment. And that's why in most cases at ECA, we are doing the regional value chain where we risk and then bring in the private sector so that you can tap into the private sector resources, which is far bigger than the public resources. So we are here, at least all these issues that I've just mentioned and others our colleagues have mentioned are being discussed. They were discussed along, for the last 5 days. And as they do the consultation here and also in other places, in New York, in Mexico, and in other places, finally it will end up in Spain, where everybody sits down together to put everything together and see what are the key issues, what are the solutions. We can not only talk about the problems, but also need to come up with proposed solutions. And then finally we come up with an outcome document. That outcome document will be negotiated afterwards, but at least it will have been consultative globally. And it means that your voice is now. It's not after the outcome document has come out, but we need your own voice, we need the information. And here, the role of the media is incredible. You are the one who reach everybody. Civil society, government, it doesn't matter how powerful anybody would be. You are the center. You are the one who communicate. You are the one who collect information. You are the one who can reach private sector, civil society, governments, everybody. So your role is going to become very critical. Maybe let me not take much time because I think I've said enough. But what I wanted to say is we thank the media for being here with us, and we hope you can always popularize what has been discussed here since you have been present, and free for any questions, and then we can also chat the way forward. You should keep in touch, keep engaged until this is all done. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gatete. I'm now going to move over to members of the media for questions. Please remember to introduce yourself and the media you represent. We are also very grateful for those that have joined us online. And so let's have the questions. Reuters over there. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. My name is David from Reuters. My question goes to His Excellency Ato Ahmed Shadi, and the question is regarding Ethiopia's effort to get a new finance from international creditors. So the first question is, we have been hearing media report about Ethiopia getting financing assurance from its official creditors. So has Ethiopia received financing assurance from its official creditors as a part of effort to get a new IMF program? And the second question I have is, has Ethiopia secured any staff level agreement with the IMF for a new reform program? And the third question I have is, when will the executive board of IMF will meet? Because there are media reports that the executive board of IMF will meet on July 29 next week. So can you confirm if this is true? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Why can't they ask many questions and then we can answer together maybe? And that will give the minister a chance.
Yes, there are 3 questions for Ethiopia. Maybe we start with the 3 questions, and hopefully if there are other questions for the finance minister, we can take that as well so that he addresses them all together. Please go ahead. Yes, please. Please go ahead.
Sorry.
And introduce yourself.
Yeah, not for Ethiopians, just I wanted to raise some question for Secretary General.
Secretary General, let's hold on. Would like the minister to first of all address the 3 key questions on the IMF and financing. Please go ahead, Excellency.
Good, thank you very much. Ethiopia was implementing its own homegrown economic reform agenda for the last 6 years, where opening up of the economic sectors, as well as reforming part of different economic sectors, including privatization and other issues. Its fundamental objective is basically to enhance and sustain inclusive growth, to have a stable price in the economy in terms of controlling inflation, as well as also achieving sustainable balance of payment positions that will support growth and development in the economy. We had a very good successful outcome as part of those economic reform agendas. We had sustained one of the fastest economic growth compared to many other sub-Saharan Africa. So in terms of growth, Ethiopia has demonstrated its economic reform agenda was able to achieve or enable Ethiopia to achieve a strong growth, in most cases double than most sub-Saharan African countries. So that is a very important outcome as a result of the reform we have been implementing. Second, despite multiple challenges, both domestic and international, Ethiopia has sustained a strong growth. And that growth has enabled Ethiopia to expand its infrastructure, it is to deepen its human development, and also address poverty reduction and equitable development as well in the economy. That also is very important. We need to do more in terms of controlling inflation in the economy, also having sustainable debt situation, that's also another challenge, and also sustainable balance of position, that's also another issue. So as part of the second homegrown reform agenda, which is a culmination which has continued from the first economic reform agenda, is to consolidate the gains of the first economic reform agenda, homegrown economic reform agenda, but also to introduce and further deepen the economic reform agenda. The fundamental objective is macroeconomic stability, strong growth, sustainable balance of payment position, as well as also achieving a sustainable debt to the economy. So as a result of that, based on our own economic policies, our own economic reform agendas, We have been working with our international development financial institutions like IMF as well as World Bank and other development partners, which is going to support both Ethiopia on this economic reform agenda. So debt sustainability is a major issue, macroeconomic stability another issue, price stability is another issue, sustaining and further deepening the foreign exchange reform issues is also another area. So this is an ongoing discussion. It's going very well, and the final outcome and results will be disclosed at the appropriate time. We cannot give more than that any information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shide. There's a question for the Secretary General.
For that, can I just
Yes,
chip
of
in
course.
one thing?
Okay.
Just for the sake of the media, and the reason why we kept talking about debt. Long time ago, we used to have a framework that was really quite useful. You used to hear the word Paris Club. The debts, most of the debts were owed to the World Bank, to the IMF, to ADB, and bilaterals, and it was very concessional. So if you had a problem of debt, you would go to Paris, and then they would meet, they would help countries to restructure their debt, much easier. If you had private debt, you would go to London. We had a London Club. And now, the situation has changed. Now the borrowing is not only from the bilateral countries, and also the international financial institutions. We've had non-Paris Club members. We borrow from China, borrow from India, borrow from Turkey, Arab funds, so many of them. But at the same time, many countries have issued Eurobonds, meaning you are also borrowing from private sector. And with that combination, now it changes to no longer Paris Club. Now the G20 established the common framework. The common framework also has issues that can be fixed to make sure that it works perfectly. So as they try, and that's one of the things that we are pushing, is to make sure that you have a framework that works for all. Developing countries, even including the middle-income countries, and how it works, make sure it can support many countries. And that's why, as it takes more longer in terms of implementation, in at least addressing some of the other issues, that's when the countries continue accumulating the debt, and it becomes very complicated. And that's why you hear debt now and every now and again. So I just wanted to give that information to the media so that they're aware.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gatete. There's a question for the Secretary General. So over there, please go ahead. Introduce yourself, please, and the media you come from.
Okay, thank you. My name is Milkias from Walta TV. I have a lot of questions for Secretary General. That is, at this time, there is a big shortage of finance all over the world. For this problem, the main cause is climate change. If we take some African country, they try to planting some a little green economy. They try to build green economy. As we know, with climate change, as a region, Africa is more vulnerable and affected by climate change. If the rest of the world support this region, that means they support the world. So, if we take Ethiopians, within 5 years, Ethiopian try to planting more than 32 billion plants all over the country. This needs financial support before the country asking the financial institution of the world. So, in this conference, the main cause of world financial shortages is the climate change. What do you think, or what the nation think to support Ethiopian initiative, especially in building a green economy as well as to assure food security? This is my first question. And the other one is, sometimes the World Bank financial lender is try to push poor country like Africans to implement what they need in the country. For example, sometimes If we take Uganda in 2023 as well as 2024, the government of Uganda is blocked homosexual activities in the country. So at that time, for example, IMF as well as World Bank blocked the financial support for the Uganda. In this view, some of African countries have their own culture and their own behavior as well as culture. So if the United Nations try to build sustainable financial support as well as equitable financial distribution all over the world, how you are going to assure this equitable financial distribution all over the world? And my last question is, in 2025, the conference will held in Spain. At that time, what the African African leaders have to do to make their sound on the conference, because this financial shortage is directly affected Africans. What you are going to recommend for the leaders? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Really, I'd suggest you only ask not more than 2 questions so that we give others a chance. Please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Sambo from Oben. My question goes to Mr. Lee. Finance is the main challenge for developing countries for just to realize these sustainable development goals, agendas, and only 6 years left to realize this goal, and still there is much more to be done. While the issue of reforming the national financial institution has been the question of all developing countries for a while, and that this conference has positive impacts in solving financial related challenges of developing countries in system reform. Then, thank you.
Thank you. Then we have one more question online. There's a question on the question of a country like Ethiopia that is doing a lot on greening in its economy, but doesn't necessarily have resources for that. What are the options for those kinds of national initiatives? And then we have also the question. Please repeat your question. Wasn't too clear.
All right. My question is that finance has been the main challenge for the developing countries to realize the agenda of sustainable development goals. And there has been the question of reform in the international financial institution, which has been asked by different developing countries all over the world. And what will be the impact of this conference in solving that question that has been there, especially in system reform? Thank you, then.
Okay, so the impact of this conference, the impact of this conference on these big questions of financing development and the reform of the financial architecture. Please go ahead, Mr. Lee.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your questions. Let me pick up the first gentleman's question, the last one, how Spain conference could generate more impact to help to address the challenges facing by African continent. I guess one of the striking features for this first PRECOM was that we have a number of ministers, both from the finance ministry as well as from the development and the foreign affairs, to join the discussion here at the policy level, at the political level, and all the participants received a very strong and firm voices from the African continent. What is their concerns? What is the gap there? What is the way out or proposals from the African countries? So that I guess all in all, as the minister just now said, that the discussions here, the strong voice from the African continent would serve as one of the key inputs for the whole preparation process for the FFD4 to be held in Spain. Although for this PRECOM, we did not touch upon the specific proposal for the African continent alone, but the momentum has been generated and shared by member states, and also the civil societies, private sector financial institutions. So that's, to me, to UN, lay down a very solid foundation for the further discussion, and then the final assessment, the decision will be made next year in Spain, the Seville conference. With regard to your first question on climate financing or climate action, especially with regard to the African continent, it is very true that African countries contributed almost zero to the global climate change, but they suffered the most. And then now what would be way out then from the UN strategy from the COP28 held last year in Dubai, we all underlined 3 pillars. One is that commitments by the international community, especially by the development partners on climate financing, should be scaled up, should be delivered. Second, there should be a very profound national strategy on the green economy transitions. So we will link national strategies with the international agenda. That will be discussed at the forthcoming COP29 to be held in Baku, Azerbaijan, focusing on climate financing. And third pillar is that we need to rebuild the trust among the different partners. So that's my understanding. And with regard to the Uganda's case, yes, whatever the package to be developed, to be delivered by international financial architecture, certainly the national condition, the national cultural, national priorities should be taken into account. That is from UN's perspective, international partners' systems should be well linked to the national development strategies with the host countries, with the host continent. That's our perspective, so that's our position. Sorry.
Thank you. Yes. Mr. Lee, please finish, and then.
Yes, and in this connection, I just want to highlight one point. Also, the answer to your question. The Secretary General of the United Nations 2 years ago came up with a very bold proposal, that is to have this internationally supported SDG Stimulus Plus. The target in that proposal suggested annually we need to add up $500 billion per year to support the developing countries to accelerate their sustainable development strategies, as well as their battle against the climate change. So we really hope by next year, when global leaders meet again in Seville, Spain, they would come up with concrete steps to meet or to promote this SDG stimulus.
Okay. Mr. Shide, you have.
One point on green economy and climate issue. This conference also addressed the issue of climate finance. That we had a lot of international summits, international resolutions regarding climate finance. We believe the commitment is not yet met fully. But Ethiopia is doing a lot on this aspect. We have adopted a climate resilient green economy development strategy, which is embedded in the long-term development plan of the country, which is the 10-year development program. And we have also a financing mechanism, CRG financing mechanisms. And we have also a massive program, which is a national program, which is called Green Legacy Initiative, which is championed by the Prime Minister. Now it is sustained over so many years and has been institutionalized, where millions and millions of Ethiopians every year collectively participate by contributing their labor, their collective effort in planting billions of seedlings. Now we have almost surpassed 35 billion, and this year we will surpass this rainy season more than 40 billion. So This is a big program, and the success of this program is basically the whole people of Ethiopia has participated significantly, whether it is civil servant, every member of household in all Kabbales, in all districts. It's a big national program. This is also one of the unifying factor for the national identity as well, where every year a lot of Ethiopians come together to plant seedlings. And these seedlings are good for environment. Some are fruits, some are also agricultural crops, which is very important. So we believe while we're doing this significantly, contributing to climate change agenda, but we are not getting enough financing. And the upcoming Financing for Development Conference and the upcoming COP conferences should really address the climate finance issue, that there has to be a binding, real commitment on supporting countries like Ethiopia, which is doing significantly on its own in this important global agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's one more round of questions from those that are online. And for Mr. Gatete, the African News Channel is asking you to maybe briefly talk through what this meeting and this process of the FFD can help to resolve the unique challenges that Africa faces in terms of financing for development. You're also being asked, particularly in the current economic and environmental crisis, how can the international community better support African nations? So that whole question of global solidarity is an issue here. And then what does the ECA envision for itself in the implementation and the strategies of the strategies and solutions proposed? That's for Mr. Gatete. For Mr. Lee, there's a question by the African News Channel that's asking about the financing gap for developing, which has ballooned to USD 4 trillion annually. What are the key proposals being discussed to address the immense challenge? Is the priorities for Spain, what it is that you'll be focusing on in Spain, and the specific changes that are being considered to make the beneficial for developing countries. And then, Mr. Shide, your last round of questions is, how do you see Ethiopia's role in reshaping the international financial architecture through this conference or through this process? And what specific outcomes are you hoping to achieve? You're also being asked about Ethiopia's primary concerns and what strategies would you advocate for to address these issues, as well as how Ethiopia plans to mobilize domestic resources to attract international investments to bridge the 4 trillion annual financing gap for sustainable development. So those are the main questions. I think with those, we are going to wrap up because I know that you also have other meetings coming up. So over to you, Mr. Shide, you can kick us off.
Thank you very much. Ethiopia, together with other African countries, as well as other developing countries, we have a collective voice when it comes to addressing global economic governance and global financial architecture. We are saying global financial governance, global economic governance, and the reform of international financial institutions is very important. The capacity of international financial institutions has to be strengthened so that they should respond to the needs of the developing countries like Ethiopia, based on their own economic policies, as well as based on their needs. So there has to be renewed, strong international commitment for ODA. There has to be sufficient international financial resources which has to be mobilized. Most countries are not meeting that commitment, and that should be strengthened. Second, the channeling of those resources should be in line and consistent with the needs of those countries which are like Ethiopia. I mean, like World Bank, we need, one of the biggest development financial institutions which is responding like to the needs of Ethiopia is like World Bank, but still it needs to raise more resources based on IDA replenishment. There has to be more resources on that. There has to be more financing to the private sector that is coming to countries like Ethiopia. There has to be de-risking. So a combination of additional resources and making sure the modalities are consistent with the country's needs, and also countries should be on the driving seat when it comes to how to utilize these international financial resources. And Ethiopia will continue to work with other African countries, other developing countries, in terms of articulating this voice toward this upcoming conference in Spain. We are privileged and honored to host the first preparatory session for the upcoming Financing for Development Conference. This is very much consistent to Addis Ababa Action Agenda, which is a result of Financing for Development Conference 9 years ago. So we will continue to be a champion, a voice for Africa, a voice for developing countries. Global development needs significant global commitment. We are also saying we need to do our share. Domestic resource mobilization is fundamental, is very key. And we should do every effort to mobilize domestic financial resources. Ethiopia has been working as part of its own homegrown economic reform agenda, which we are going to deepen also with significant additional reform measures. One of the key components of that reform is enhancing domestic resource mobilization, both in addressing tax policy issues and tax administrations, improving the systems and digitalization of tax collections, and enhancing the tax enforcement capability, and also making sure that we consistently raise revenue. The target for the coming 4 years for Ethiopia is we need to increase 4 percentage point in terms of tax to GDP ratio. This requires significant work, and we have already laid out this as part of our economic reform agenda. We are going to work both on the policy side and the administration side, and enhancing the systems and digitalization of tax and revenue collections, both on the custom side, on the domestic revenue side as well. So Ethiopia will continue to do that. That's very important. Additionally, we need to leverage more private finance into the economy. We need to strengthen our local businesses. We need to attract a lot of FDI, ease of doing business, and macroeconomic stability, macroeconomic reform agenda will be deepened for the objective of sustaining growth, sustaining private sector-led growth, both supporting both domestic businesses and attracting foreign direct investment is at the cornerstone of our reform agenda. And since we have hosted this meeting, this agenda has been well articulated, and the upcoming different meetings also. Ethiopia will continue to work with other UN member states to articulate this voice. And global financial governance, global financial architecture needs reform, and that at the center of that reform should be, there has to be a strong commitment for global finance, for development, for developing countries, and mostly for the least developing countries, which are moving up the ladder of development. They need strong support, but we need to do also our share, which is domestic revenue mobilization, improving enabling environment for private investment, as well as soliciting also innovative financing for all different sources. So all different aspects of financing has to be utilized, and Ethiopia will continue to work with other member countries to this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Mr. Gatete.
Yeah, thank you so much. I don't know whether the media understood. I said these two are the most important people. The minister has more money, Mr. Lee has better ideas, and they've shown it. So I don't know why they asked me also to give ideas, but let me try. Number one, we are having this FFD4. The main reason is for us to be able to understand the challenges in the same way, so that by the time we get to Spain next year in June 30th, we all have a common understanding of the issues, having consulted globally. And from that, then finding a solution now would be very clear. We'll all be reading from the same book. I think that's the most important. Then secondly, that would help in terms of what we need to reform. How do we make sure that the resources that we need, the international financial institutions that we have, can be able to deliver those kind of resources? What do we need to do technically? What do we need to do in terms of governance, in terms of structure? It will be very clear because we'll be addressing the same issues. The other important issue, apart from that, is trying to see who does what. What do rich countries do? How about the developing countries? And that's why we're talking about domestic resource mobilization. Each one has something to do to make sure that we can achieve what we have found that are the needs in terms of financing, in terms of debt, in terms of this. And then thirdly, we also need to figure out how to solve the issue of debt. And that will have been very clear. We have shown countries are highly indebted. We have discussed what is missing and also discussing how we can fix it in terms of the global debt that is affecting many of our countries. Then for us as ECA, we are also working with all ministers of finance, some who came here and others who did not come, because we also, as the secretary, we are the convener of the Conference of Ministers of Finance, Development and Planning, meaning we consult with them. We are also the secretariat for the high-level working group that is putting all the elements together so that we can be able to discuss them, whether it is here, whether it's in the corridors of the IMF and World Bank during the spring meetings, which we discussed, and also the annual meetings. And also, what we are discussing here contributes also to the Summit of the Future. The Pact of the Future includes the reform of the global financial architecture. So we'll continue with that one until next year, when we'll come up with something that really makes sense. But we as ECA also, we brief the African ambassadors in New York. Because at the end of the day, once everything is done, they will sit in New York. Our ambassadors are the ones who will be negotiating. Now, for them to negotiate better, for us as ECA, we'll go there and brief them so that at least they understand what is coming out as an outcome document, but also the proposals. This would help them in terms of getting a better deal for the concerns of our continent. We have to realize that really things have changed, and that's why we're having these problems. The aid to Africa has declined significantly. The foreign direct investment has almost been reduced by half. 82 billion in 2022, and the other year, it was last year, it was 45 billion. It's only the remittances that has increased, but the other sources of money has continuously declined, and that's why we need to do things differently. That's why it's very, very important, because usually there was a decision taken, as you all know, that the rich countries would pay 0.7% of GNI, so the gross national investment, and it has not happened really for all the countries. Only very few countries have achieved this. And that's why we're saying, what should be the alternative sources of financing? So ODA is declining, FDI is declining, and also the resources which are concessional have also they are not enough to cover the gap that we need. And at the end of the day, we also have to achieve the SDGs, and that's why the gap is about 4 trillion in terms of the estimation, so that we can really be able to reach where we want. But that's what I think I can say for now. But also beyond the Conference of Ministers, we also coordinate other people who are intervening in development. We call it the Africa Regional Forum for Sustainable Development. All the stakeholders that intervene in development, they come together. This year, they were at ECA. We had more than 1,700 participants globally, and that's why we discuss development. But these are the challenges that also we need to pay attention to. Maybe that's all I can say for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Gatete. Let's hear from the Secretary General of the conference in his closing roundup. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I guess colleagues may share with us that the United Nations is not a lending agency or lending institution. We don't have financial resources, but UN is empowered to conduct a norm setting for global affairs or global issues, global challenges. So that is why when we prepared our outcome for the FFD4 next year, we need to bear in mind what kind of the global landscape now. It has been dramatically changed comparing with 9 years ago or 10 years ago. Now we have the geopolitical tensions. Now we have the climate disasters or climate-related disasters and its impacts. And also, we have this global macroeconomic imbalance. And also, we witnessed the losing momentum of the global trade as one of the engines for the sustainable growth. So during the conference, it has been widely discussed and shared among all participants what would be the pragmatic way out or pragmatic proposals to move forward. I guess first of all, it is the political commitment from the leaders, from the governments. If we can rebuild the trust among all the major groups or all the countries and all the multi-stakeholders, then it is still hopeful to meet the gap for the financing on sustainable development. Specifically, several things we can further explore. Number one, how we treat, how we address the debt burden facing by developing countries, especially in this continent. Second, how we can push the MDBs, multilateral development banks, to increase their lending capacity. Third, how we could facilitate the developing countries to generate the more domestic resources through the international tax cooperation. In this connection, that I just want to highlight that United Nations now is conducting an international tax cooperation process. It has established an ad hoc committee based on strong recommendation and push by the African group. And that committee would help the international partners to define in the coming month what would be the framework for our cooperation on domestic resources mobilization and international tax cooperation. And the fourth one is that how we could revitalize the regional global trade to continue to provide impetus for the sustainable development and then also address the financing gap there. Last but not least, it's an UN initiative. We called it IMFFS. Up to now, more than 80 countries joined us. The essential point is that to integrate all financial requirements linked to the sustainable development together. That's something that I guess the host country has showed a great progress on that. But let me say that the last point about how we can expedite the reform to increase the representation and the voices of developing countries in international financial institutions architecture. We need to have the more representatives from the developing world in the decision table at the World Bank and the IMF and also other financial institutions to inject more the perspectives, priorities, and also proposals from the developing side. Then also we need to push our partners from international financial institutions to synergize more in their operations, in their operational models with the SDGs. So that's something that we believe that we can further advance that. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. We've now come to, Mr. Gatete, last word.
Yeah, before we conclude, I just wanted, first of all, to thank Mr. Lee for just choosing to host this conference here in Addis Ababa, the capital of Africa. Very, very important because that's where also the FFD3 was drafted here. We also thank very much, Honorable Minister, your gracious host for this conference. The time you have put in, the facilities, the entire facilitation would not have been successful really without your help and you've been, in all ways possible, I think you've done your best in terms of supporting this. We very, very much appreciate, really, your contribution. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much. Just to say thank you to all the media who attended in person and online, and everyone else, and for your patience and for listening to these very, very complex challenges ahead of us. Lots of work ahead to implement our sustainable future, and through meeting the financing gaps that we've heard about, through integrated policies at national levels, homegrown solutions that we've learned about from Ethiopia, as well as our voice as developing countries, Africa and the rest of the developing world in the reshaping the global financial architecture and global governance. So with that, thank you very much. We've come to the conclusion of our press conference. If you have any questions, additional questions, please feel free to approach us. We'll be happy to facilitate them. We are here to continue the conversation, and welcome and thank you once again. Thank you.